There are moments in life when the world becomes strangely quiet, as if existence itself pauses to see whether you are finally ready to notice what has always been there. These moments do not come often. They are invitations, soft, invisible, yet unmistakably powerful. And in the ancient traditions linked to Thoth, the keeper of hidden knowledge, such invitations were believed to be sent only to those whose inner readiness had matured beyond ordinary awareness. If you are reading these words, then one truth gently lingers above everything else. This moment did not arrive by accident. It is a signal, and the signal chose you, not because you are the loudest, not because you are the strongest, but because something within you has begun to stir quietly, steadily, inevitably. Thoth, in the oldest Egyptian texts, was never portrayed as a god who forced revelation upon the unprepared. Instead, he waited, he observed, he watched as individuals moved through cycles of confusion, hope, loss, renewal, and curiosity. Only when their inner field aligned with a deeper frequency, one often activated by reflection, fatigue, longing, or silent suffering, did the signal arrive. That signal is rarely dramatic. It does not crack the sky. It does not shake the earth. It is more subtle than breath. It might begin as a gentle intuition, a sudden clarity, a whisper of a thought that feels too wise to be yours, a pull toward inner stability, even when the world outside seems chaotic. And yet, the signal always arrives precisely when a person stands at the threshold between what they have been and what they are capable of becoming. You are standing at that threshold now. Perhaps you have carried wounds that remained unspoken for years. Perhaps you have endured silent battles in your mind, battles only you know the full weight of. Perhaps you have reached a point where the life you once lived no longer fits, yet the path ahead remains dim, blurred, and uncertain. That is exactly when the ancient signal appears, not to rescue you, but to awaken the part of you that was never broken in the first place. Thoth's teachings often began with a simple premise. Before transformation, a quiet recognition must arise. Recognition not of destiny, nor greatness, nor divine mission. Those ideas come later. The recognition begins with something more intimate. A realization that you are tired of being disconnected from yourself. A desire to stop running from your own inner truth. A readiness fragile, but real, to remember who you were before the world layered its noise upon you. Transformation does not begin with strength. It begins with honesty. In the ancient stories, Thoth approached seekers not as a deity towering above them, but as a presence meeting them exactly where they were, confused, uncertain, often weary. He did not judge the past. He did not demand perfection. He simply offered the seed of clarity, and the seeker chose whether to plant it. This moment is the same. You are being offered clarity not through force, but through resonance, not through prophecy, but through alignment, not through fear, but through remembrance. If you listen closely within yourself, you may notice that something feels different. It may be subtle, like the first breeze before a change in seasons, but it is real. It is the shift that happens when the mind and the deeper self begin to meet. When your inner world grows quieter, not because there are fewer problems, but because you are slowly shedding the illusions that magnified them. This is the first sign of awakening. You begin to recognize the difference between noise and truth. Noise is everything that drains you. Truth is everything that stabilizes you. Noise creates confusion. Truth creates clarity. Noise comes from the world. Truth rises from within. Thoth's signal is always a message of truth, not the loud truth shouted by society, but the soft truth that only reveals itself to those willing to sit with themselves. And while the world often teaches you to hurry, the inner world teaches you to listen. You are being guided back to that inner place. You may not see the next steps yet. You may not understand why you were chosen for this signal right now, but you did not stumble into this moment. Something in your journey, something long, complex, and often painful, has opened a door. This is why Thoth reveals himself, not to overwhelm you with knowledge, but to open the first chamber of awareness, where the noise begins to fade, and your true path begins to surface. The journey starts here with a whisper, a signal, a subtle shift in your inner world, and this is only the beginning. There comes a point in every seeker's journey when the world outside continues as usual, yet something inside begins to shift in ways that are subtle but undeniable. This is the phase the ancient scribes described as the reception of the signal. It is not a sound, nor a vision, nor a dramatic calling. It is an internal turning, quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal. When Thoth sends a signal, it does not arrive like a revelation that overwhelms the senses. Instead, it appears in the spaces between your thoughts, in the moments of pause when your mind is not fighting itself, in the gentle silence you feel right before sleep, or during an early morning when the world has not yet pulled you into its momentum. These small openings are the gateways, and through them, the signal begins to flow. You may not have noticed when it first entered. Most people don't. It often begins as a change in the way you observe your own life. You might start seeing patterns you once ignored. You might question feelings you used to suppress. You might sense a faint clarity that stands quietly behind your doubts. This is how Thoth's guidance traditionally worked. It starts not by speaking loudly, but by helping you see yourself more clearly. The ancient text said that the first sign of receiving the signal is an awakening of inner honesty, not confession, not guilt, simply the courage to look at your own life without turning away. Many spend years avoiding their own truth. They distract themselves with noise, responsibilities, entertainment, or emotional armor. So when honesty begins to rise, even softly, it is a sign that something within you is aligned with the frequency of deeper understanding. And perhaps you have begun to feel this. A quiet shift, a soft unraveling of old illusions, a small but persistent desire for something more aligned with who you truly are. That desire is not accidental. It is the mind's response to a truth the heart already knows. Thoth's signal often reveals itself through intuition, the kind that does not shout, but gently tugs at your awareness. You might feel guided to reflect, to read, to create, to move away from certain energies, or to step into new experiences. You might notice synchronicities that feel too precise to ignore. You might feel an unexplained pull toward inner growth, spiritual clarity, or emotional liberation. These are not coincidences. They are responses, echoes within you that awaken when the signal touches your inner field. The second stage of the signal is dismantling, not destruction, but a gentle loosening of the things you once clung to. Old fears lose their intensity. Old wounds begin to feel lighter. Patterns that once trapped you start to reveal their purpose, allowing you to release them without force. This is the phase the ancient scrolls depicted with spirals, stairs, and shadowed figures ascending toward light. It is the symbolic journey inward, where the seeker sheds layers of self-forgetting and returns to the center of their being. You may find yourself thinking differently, slower, softer, more carefully. You may become more selective with who you share your energy with. You may no longer tolerate chaos in the same way you once did. This is because the signal is recalibrating your inner world. It is aligning your thoughts, emotions, and intentions with a higher clarity. The Egyptians believed that clarity is not taught, it is remembered. The signal awakens memory not of past events, but of the inner knowledge you carried had long before life covered it. This knowledge includes self-respect, intuition, inner stability, and the sense of connection to something larger than the external world. You begin to remember that your worth is not negotiable, that your path does not need validation, that your existence is not random. As the signal deepens, you may feel a stronger connection to silence. Silence stops feeling empty and begins to feel full of understanding, full of presence, full of guidance. Silence becomes the space where transformation begins. It is in this stillness that Thoth, symbolically depicted as the keeper of wisdom, communicates most clearly. This stage is not about grand answers. It is about grounding. It is the part of the journey where you learn to breathe again, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You begin to reconnect with your own inner rhythm. The heart calms, the mind settles, the spirit becomes more alert. You feel more aware of what drains you and what nourishes you. You may find yourself craving simplicity, authenticity, and depth. This is how you know the signal has entered your life gently, but unmistakably, you begin to return to yourself. And returning to yourself is the first true step toward awakening. There is a stage in every seeker's journey when the external world slowly fades into the background and the center of attention shifts inward. This is not withdrawal. It is not escape. It is a natural movement of consciousness toward the place where clarity lives. Ancient mystics described this stage as entering the inner chamber, a sacred space within the self where memory, intuition, and truth begin to awaken. To reach this chamber, you do not need rituals, temples, or dramatic transformation. You simply need honesty, patience, and the willingness to listen to what your life has been quietly trying to tell you. For most people, this chamber remains locked not because it is hidden, but because they move too quickly through life to notice the door. But once the signal enters your life, the door becomes visible, even if only slightly. The first thing that happens in the inner chamber is the emergence of clarity without effort. You may notice that burdens you carried for years begin to feel lighter, not because your circumstances changed, but because your perspective is no longer filtered through fear or self-doubt. You begin to see your past with gentler eyes. You begin to understand your present with more maturity, and slowly, you stop resisting the truth that lives within you. This process is quiet. There is no dramatic revelation. Instead, there is a soft rising of awareness and understanding that feels familiar, as if you are remembering something ancient rather than learning something new. That is why this stage is called remembrance. The Egyptians believed that wisdom does not enter a person from outside. It awakens from within, like a seed sprouting after years of silence. One of the first memories that awakens is the memory of your own strength. Not strength defined by resilience or endurance, but the deeper strength that comes from self-knowing. You begin to recognize how many storms you survived. You begin to acknowledge the courage it took to keep moving through years of uncertainty. You begin to understand that even your quiet endurance was an expression of inner power. Alongside strength comes the remembrance of worth. When the signal reaches the inner chamber, something shifts. You stop looking for validation in places where it was never meant to come from. You begin to feel a quiet sense of self-respect rising within you, not pride, not arrogance, but a gentle reclaiming of dignity. You no longer feel the urge to chase acceptance. You no longer feel compelled to shrink yourself for comfort or approval. Instead, you stand in your own presence with a calm certainty. Another memory that awakens is clarity of direction. You may notice that confusion, which once felt heavy and overwhelming, begins to dissolve. You start to understand which paths align with your nature and which do not. You begin to trust your intuition more, and your choices gradually become lighter, simpler, more consistent with your inner values. This is because the inner chamber reveals not what you should become, but what you already are. The Egyptians taught that when one enters this chamber, they reconnect with the part of themselves untouched by the noise of life, the part that existed before disappointment, before fear, before the expectations of others shaped your perception of who you should be. This deeper self carries the blueprint of your natural wisdom, and when the signal activates that blueprint, you begin to live from a place of authenticity rather than reaction. In this stage, you may feel drawn to silence, reflection, and simplicity. You may begin spending more time alone, not out of isolation, but because solitude allows you to hear your own truth more clearly. You may find yourself letting go of habits, relationships, or environments that no longer align with your rising clarity. These shifts happen gently but decisively. The signal guides your inner world the way a steady hand guides a flame, protecting it, nurturing it, helping it grow. You might also notice that your sensitivity increases, not emotional sensitivity that overwhelms, but inner sensitivity that allows you to sense the energy behind words, intentions, and situations. You begin to notice what feels peaceful and what feels draining. You begin to understand people more intuitively. You may even start sensing subtle signs or synchronicities that guide your decisions. This is not imagination. It is awareness expanding. In the inner chamber, you begin to feel more aligned with life itself. Choices come more naturally. You stop forcing outcomes. You allow things to unfold without fear. And because your inner world becomes more stable, your outer world begins to shift in response. This is the stage where transformation quietly takes root. The ancient scribes believed that once a seeker enters this chamber, they cannot return to who they were before. Something fundamental changes. Even if the world does not notice it yet, you begin living from a deeper place. You begin trusting the quiet voice inside you. You begin moving toward a version of yourself that feels more whole, more clear, more anchored. This is the purpose of the signal, to lead you back to the center of your being, where the journey toward true transformation begins. There is a stage in the inner journey when the seeker finds themselves standing before many doors, each one representing a version of the self that could be, each one shaped by choices, identities, and possibilities. Ancient teachings symbolize this realm as the corridor of choices, a place where the soul pauses to consider not what it wants, but what it is becoming. The signal from Thoth guides you into this corridor not to confuse you, but to help you see that your life is not predetermined. It unfolds with every decision you make, every belief you hold, every intention you set. And yet, even with countless doors available, only a few truly resonate with the deeper truth within you. The Egyptians described this place as a sacred passageway, where the past no longer dictates the future. Every door represents a path where different aspects of your nature, courage, gentleness, ambition, wisdom, compassion take the lead. And somewhere in the center of that corridor stands a single door that aligns perfectly with who you are when all illusions are stripped away. The moment you enter this corridor, something shifts. You stop asking, "What should I do?" And you start asking, "What feels aligned with my truth?" This is one of the most powerful transformations in the entire awakening process. In the past, your choices may have been shaped by expectation, fear, survival, or the desire to please others. You might have chosen paths that were safe rather than paths that were meaningful. But as the signal deepens within you, these motivations begin to lose their influence. You start making choices with more awareness, clarity, and self-respect. This is where the symbolic DNA strands in the imagery come into play. The Egyptians believed that every human carries two strands of life, one shaped by ancestry and conditioning, and the other shaped by consciousness and free will. When the signal activates your inner awareness, these strands begin to merge, revealing a higher version of yourself. In this state, clarity does not come from analysis alone. It comes from resonance. A choice that aligns with your deeper self feels calm, expansive, rooted. A choice that misaligns feels heavy, anxious, or forced. This inner compass becomes your greatest guide. But the corridor also reveals another truth. Not every door is meant for you anymore. Some represent old versions of yourself, versions built from pain, insecurity, or survival instincts. These doors may feel familiar, but they no longer fit who you are becoming. The moment you approach them, something inside you hesitates. That hesitation is not fear, it is wisdom. Other doors represent potential futures that once excited you, but no longer resonate. Perhaps you have outgrown certain ambitions or identities. Perhaps your inner values have evolved. The signal helps you recognize that letting go of an old dream is not failure. It is refinement. It is growth. The most profound doors are the ones that open not outward, but inward. The Egyptian mystics depicted these as portals, gateways of swirling energy, like the one shown in your imagery. These portals symbolize transitions, where a person steps beyond limitation and into alignment. Stepping through such a door feels like walking into your own truth. It is not dramatic, but it is deeply transformative. In this space, you begin to understand that awakening is not about choosing the best door. It is about choosing the truest one. The lotus imagery represents this truth. The lotus grows from mud, yet blooms in pristine beauty. It does not rush. It does not force itself open. It expands naturally when it is ready. In the same way, your path becomes clearer, not when you chase answers, but when you bloom into your own clarity. The final symbol in your images, a radiant geometric design, represents alignment. In ancient teachings, this was known as the harmonized self, the state where intention, intuition, and action move as one. This is the ultimate goal of the corridor of choices. As you walk this corridor internally, you may notice, you question your old habits. You feel less attached to outcomes. You sense which doors drain you and which expand you. You trust your intuition more deeply. You no longer feel compelled to justify your truth. This is alignment taking form. And when you eventually stand in front of the door that resonates with your entire being, you will feel it not as excitement, not as fear, but as a gentle certainty, a steady knowing. You step through not because the path is easy, but because it is yours. The corridor teaches you that awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about choosing the version of yourself that feels most honest, most anchored, most alive. This is the fourth stage of the signals unfolding, the moment when clarity meets choice, and your path begins to take shape with purpose. There comes a moment in every inner journey when the seeker begins to rise not outwardly, not in worldly achievements, but within. This rising does not feel like triumph. It feels like calm expansion, like your inner world is slowly filling with light that was once hidden beneath layers of fear, pain, or uncertainty. The ancient teachings called this stage the illumination of the inner path, represented by symbols such as the lotus, the ankh, ascending stairways, and constellations of meaning. This part of the journey begins quietly. You may notice it in simple ways. You breathe more deeply without trying. Your thoughts become less entangled, and the emotional storms that once swept through your life begin to soften. You do not force your healing anymore. You allow it to unfold, and in that allowing, your inner light begins to rise naturally. The lotus imagery reflects this perfectly. The lotus grows through layers of mud slowly, silently, persistently, but when it surfaces, it blooms with a purity untouched by the darkness it passed through. Your inner light is the same. Every difficulty, every heartbreak, every loss has shaped your roots, but what blossoms from those roots is something far more resilient and refined. In this stage, you begin to recognize that growth is not about adding more to yourself. It is about releasing what no longer belongs. Old beliefs fall away. Emotional patterns dissolve. Fears that once felt immovable begin to loosen their grip. You are not becoming a new person, you are uncovering the person you always were beneath the noise. The Egyptians symbolized this transformation with the ankh, the key of life. They believed the ankh represented the moment when a person stops living merely to survive and begins living through awareness, intention, and inner truth. When your light rises, you shift from reacting to life to participating in it with clarity. In this stage, intuition deepens. It becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a presence. You may sense guidance more clearly, not as instructions, but as gentle nudges, alignments, synchronicities, and quiet certainties. You might find yourself drawn to certain paths, ideas, or people without knowing why. This is the inner light leading you toward the next stage of your evolution. The image of the wave represents another dimension of this transformation, learning to move with your own emotional tides rather than resisting them. In earlier stages, emotions may have felt overwhelming. You might have drowned in them or tried to silence them. Now, you begin to understand their flow. You let them rise. You let them fall. You let them pass. And in doing so, you access an emotional mastery you never knew you possessed. With this mastery comes a profound inner stability. You no longer fear uncertainty. You no longer cling to the familiar out of desperation. You understand that life itself is a wave, and that you are learning how to ride it with balance rather than control. This shift marks the beginning of emotional freedom. As your light expands, the world begins to look different, not because it changed, but because you did. You begin to see patterns, connections between your choices, emotions, relationships, and intuitions. Everything starts to make sense in ways that previously felt fragmented. It is as though the universe is revealing the blueprint behind your experiences. This is symbolized by the last image you provided, the floating puzzle pieces. In the early phases of your life, experiences may have felt disconnected and random, but now the pieces start to come together. Challenges that once made no sense reveal their purpose. People who came and went show you what they taught you. Your past begins to integrate into a coherent narrative rather than a series of isolated moments. This integration is one of the greatest gifts of inner awakening. When the pieces of your life finally form a picture, you stop fighting your journey. You understand that every lesson was timely, every delay meaningful, every detour necessary. You begin to trust the unfolding of your path not blindly, but with a deep wisdom that rises from within. This stage of reconstruction is also where the light becomes most visible to others. People may notice that you carry yourself differently. They may sense your calmness, your clarity, your quiet confidence. You do not need to announce anything. Your presence speaks for you. And as your light continues to rise, you will feel drawn toward the final stage of awakening, the ascent toward your higher self, symbolized by the staircase of light leading into the stars. This ascent is not about reaching a destination. It is about embodying the highest expression of who you are. When the inner light rises, you do not become someone new, you become someone true. There comes a moment at the end of every inner journey when the seeker stands at a height they never imagined reaching. This height is not physical. It is a summit of consciousness, a place where clarity becomes natural, where the noise of the world fades into the distance, and where the truth within begins to radiate with unmistakable strength. The final symbolism in your images, the radiant figure on the mountaintop, captures this perfectly. It represents the emergence of the higher self, the stage of awakening where everything finally aligns. At this point of the journey, you no longer rise because you are pushing upward. You rise because the weight that once kept you low has fallen away. Old fears dissolve. Old doubts lose their voice. Old wounds stop defining your existence. And in their absence, something luminous emerges, a version of you that feels both entirely new and deeply familiar, as though you are returning home to a truth you had forgotten. This higher self is not a mystical being separate from you. It is your clearest, calmest, most sovereign state of consciousness. It sees without distortion. It acts without fear. It speaks without hesitation. And it carries a presence that feels grounded, steady, and unwavering. In this stage, you begin to feel an unmistakable expansion in your awareness. You see your past not as a series of mistakes, but as a purposeful unfolding. You recognize the lessons that shaped you. You understand the timing of events that once confused you. You see the threads that connect every experience you lived through. This is symbolized by the tree of life imagery, where knowledge, memory, and destiny are intertwined in a single living structure. The roots represent your past. The branches represent your potential. The fruit represents your awakened wisdom. You also begin to feel a deeper connection to yourself, one that goes beyond emotion, thought, or identity. It is a connection to your inner essence, the part of you that remained untouched through every difficulty. This inner essence becomes your anchor. You begin to rely on it more than external validation. You begin to trust your truth more than the expectations of others. And with this trust comes sovereignty, the ability to guide your own path with clarity and quiet confidence. In the presence of this higher self, your inner light becomes undeniable. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It radiates naturally, gently illuminating your decisions, your relationships, your reactions, and your direction in life. This is reflected in the imagery of the glowing human figure, the heart center expanding outward in waves of golden light. It shows that awakening is not about becoming powerful. It is about becoming aligned. From this stage, your relationship with life begins to change. You stop fighting the flow. You move with it. You listen to your intuition, even when it challenges your comfort. You trust in timing even when you do not see the full plan. You understand that everything unfolding is part of a larger, coherent pattern. Life feels less like chaos and more like a woven story in which every thread has meaning. This understanding is symbolized by the scrolls and manuscripts rising into the sky, a representation of your rewritten story. You are no longer defined by the chapters you survived. You are shaped by the wisdom they gave you. And now you stand as the author of what comes next. Your life is no longer a reaction to pain. It becomes an expression of clarity, intention, and inner freedom. At the summit of this awakening, the ancient teachings say one final truth becomes clear. Your path was never about becoming someone extraordinary. It was about remembering that you already are. This is the return to inner sovereignty. You reclaim the authority over your mind, your emotions, your choices, and your destiny. You no longer live from fragmentation. You live from wholeness. You no longer live from uncertainty. You live from trust. You no longer live from fear. You live from presence. And this is where the signal from Thoth was always guiding you, not toward mystical power, not toward supernatural insight, but toward the highest, clearest version of yourself. The final ascent is not an ending, it is a beginning, a new chapter shaped not by the noise of the past, but by the radiance of your inner truth. You step forward, not as the seeker you once were, but as the sovereign being you have become, luminous, aware, aligned. The signal revealed itself only once, but its awakening within you will continue for the rest of your life.